Yeah, it's really obviously. I think a lot of Purdue. Think a lot of their program um, and what they've done in this league for a number of years, including this year, is really impressive. They've been able to maintain a certain standard of really excellence and with their run. I think they're good. I think they're they obviously, like all of us, have had some ups and downs to their season, but I think they're clearly a top 30 program. We're going to see the very best. Clearly a top 30 team in the country. We're going to see their very best tomorrow. You always see that from a really well-coached team. After a home loss, they're just a week removed from playing really well at Indiana in a rival game where they played exceptionally well on the road. So we're going to get their very best. They're good, they're talented, they're well coached, and I think when you look at their numbers, there's a reason why kind of the metrics for what it's worth really like this Purdue team. They do a lot of things well.
When you are evaluating them, do you look at when they score 100 points? Do you also look at when they score 37 points? I know they've seemed to be as all over the place as almost anybody this season. How do you begin the process of figuring out what to focus on when you're breaking down what they do?
Well, I think you are looking at their body of work. Listen, Penn State would have beaten anybody in the country by a significant margin the other night. They just would have. They would have. They look like a legit Final Four contending team. Made just about every shot. You make 10 threes in the first half, several of which were contested. With a player like Stevens, you're probably gonna have a nice cushion there, and they obviously battled back. So I think you look at the body of their work. I think it was one of those games. But like I said, they're a week and a half removed from really going, having a couple blowout wins, one at home, one on the road. So they're good.
Chris, I'm just looking. You've had like 6 rotation players injured this year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even your transfer is out, and Musa didn't play a minute.
Yeah.
How has that affected practice? I mean, and it's come almost like one guy comes back, and then maybe Dwayne has his ribs, and then he gets back, and then Luther has the shoulder. I mean, that's got to be pretty disruptive.
Yeah, it's been unlike any year I've ever experienced when it comes to that, and we very much consider, DJ's situation. It's like an injury, right? And I think most people look at things now in those ways, that while it's not a physical injury, it's very similar to that. So, yeah, it's been unlike anything I've experienced. I've had years where, we've had some injuries or whatever the case, but not almost from the get-go and almost from the start. And when you include the season-ending injury to Musa, which I think certainly would have helped our practices and would have helped us in games, given when we were deep at some areas. And then Justin really being not healthy until about a month and a half ago. Never experienced anything like it. Having said that, we're kind of in survival mode right now in a lot of ways with some of that, and our guys, I think, are in a pretty good place. We are more conscious as a staff right now that we have ever been as to the wear and tear on our guys' bodies because of because of the concerns about depth and injuries. So we are more in tune to that than we've ever been.
How do you guard against not feeling sorry for yourself, making excuses? I mean, sports aren't fair, man.
Yeah, they're not. They're not, and people all over the country have injuries, and at the end of the day, what people are gonna, look at with us, you guys are following us day to day. You know the ins and outs of our team as as well as anyone. But at the end of the day, it's kind of, did you win or did you lose? And did you perform or not? And did you make the NCAA tournament or not? And that'll be the postscript. So for us, we've not really talked about those things as a group. We really haven't. The specific, injuries and run of injuries.
Speaking of fairness, the fairness issue, we've talked about this before. Kayshawn last year, kind of seniors, CJ, they stepped up.
Yeah.
You don't really have those guys with your guards necessarily.
Right.
I mean, how realistic is it to get them to do what those guys did last year? Do you just talk to them? Do you fool them into thinking it? I mean,
Yeah,
you're going to need it, right?
Well, absolutely. You got those guys in particular. Our sophomore guards have to grow up, really quickly. And by grow up, I'm talking about a run of consistency that we saw with Key last year and CJ to a certain extent. But really, like we talked about, and CJ was really good for us. But our two players that really late performed at a really high level were Key and Caleb. And Dre was good as well, but those kind of guys, you could feel them leading the way, one on the perimeter, one inside. Those guys got to grow up in their consistency, and that's the challenge for us. How can we be from one game to the next, and how do we grow and respond? I've always felt like when you get to this time of the year, the team really becomes led by your core leadership, your captains. And we'll go as those guys take us and lead us in their preparation each and every day.
Before you came in, I asked Dwayne Washington to give me one word to describe this season, and he thought for about 6 or 7 seconds before he gave me an answer. I'm curious, what do you think his answer was?
Well, it's tough to tell with Dwayne. I think it's been. I'm not ready to put a word on it. I'm not sure what he said. I have no idea.
He said fun.
Yeah, good.
But it took him a long time to think of it.
Yeah.
Which I thought was odd.
Yeah.
It was odd to me that it took him a long time to think of fun.
Yeah. Maybe he was thinking more the politically correct thing to say, but Dwayne kind of speaks from his heart. I think that it has been fun for him in a lot of ways. We've had a lot of really good moments, and the really hard moments help you appreciate the good moments. He's also been an important part of a lot of games, but there's no question there's been some ups and downs and some trials as a part of that. But I do think that he probably reflects on it in this moment and says, hey, we've had some good moments that we've really enjoyed.
He said he was trying to think of a bigger word so he'd sound smarter.
Yeah. Well, he's got a lot of personality to him, that's for sure.
What's your word so far?
I think it's. I don't know if I have one specific word. I think it's still. I would say 2 words: in process. I think it's still in process right now on what we're going to be and what we're going to, what we're going to look like and what's going to be determined here. I try not to reflect back on the season until the story's finally written, and stay in the moment as much as possible because it can be overwhelming if you don't.
Has it been dramatic?
Yeah, sure, certainly. Yeah, when you talk about some of the stuff that we've discussed over here with injuries, obviously, like a lot of teams, we had a suspension, but you have injuries to it. You have great wins. You have tough losses. That probably were we're not done with tough moments. You had a tough January. I'm sure it's been full of all that, but. It's certainly the story is still being written, and we're trying to just do our best to prepare for a really good team.
You say it's kind of hard to tell with Dwayne. Is his personality off the court, does it mirror what we see on the court? Where it's like, okay, so sometimes you're just like, what are you doing? And
Yeah, Yeah, I think so for sure. Yeah, he's not really different on the floor than he is off the floor. He's loud, boisterous, big personality, a bit unpredictable, all of that.
But in all seriousness, no, like Purdue, like they don't necessarily have one guy that they
Yeah.
just kind of flow through like most teams do. They got 5 guys averaging at least 9 points a game.
Yeah.
When you're, without giving away the game plan, obviously, but when like that's what you're scouting, and that's when you're kind of game planning for.
Yeah.
Maybe a done by committee versus like having a single 1 or 2 guys they go through. How do you? Like,
It's difficult. Their balance does make it difficult because they do have. What did Trevion Williams have? I think 36 and 20 against, or 18 against up at Michigan. Something like some crazy numbers like that. Harms has been in and out of the lineup because of injury. When he's with them, he makes them different. Thompson, the freshman's playing very well, and they've got terrific shooting. They've got a bigger ball handling kind of point forward that's always been a difficult matchup for us. They play really hard and tough. Bona fide NCAA tournament team. I would put, I won't say I put money on it, but they're a really good team.
When you're game planning for a team who kind of does it by committee versus the one who's got it clearly, like a Cassius Winston from Michigan State.
Yeah.
I guess like which one is I guess is going to cause you more of a headache when you guys are going.
You look at strengths of your team, weaknesses of our team, areas that might concern you personnel-wise, and you really kind of go from there. That's kind of what you're looking at.
Chris, it seems like the metrics kind of love Purdue every year, no matter how they're playing or what their record is. I'm just curious when you look at that stuff, and maybe you just catch it as a passing glance, and I guess conference metrics mean more now than overall metrics, but like you guys are 12th in KenPom. I think you're 22nd or something in net. Like the metrics kind of like you guys for the most part too. I'm just wondering what that tells you about your team when maybe some of the results still haven't been what you want them to be.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is your schedule, and when you add the Big Ten schedule as a part of it, it does make it more significant. In a lot of those numbers more significant. So I think people would look at Purdue's non-conference and our non-conference and said they went and challenged themselves at a pretty high level, and weren't and not everybody does that. So the numbers, when you do that, and if you perform to some degree in the non-conference, and they had some good non-conference wins where they perform very well. I think it weights in your favor. That's why everybody for the last 5 years that has looked at positioning themselves in a good place has begun with, what are you doing with your non-conference schedule? Because you're not going to have an argument if you don't put a hard non-conference schedule together at the end of the season and you're a potential tournament team.
As you're evaluating your own team, do you put any stock into what the overall efficiency numbers say about you guys, or do you only look at what it says in the league because that's all you're going to play right now?
I'm looking more at the league first. That's where I go to first. So right now we're 3rd in offensive efficiency. We're 10th in defensive efficiency. And so I'm obviously concerned about our defensive numbers. Overall, our defensive numbers are pretty good. But I would like for us to improve in that. Offensively, our efficiency numbers are good, but we need to improve in our turnover percentage, which Purdue does a great job of. So I'm looking first there. I've not really studied. I know our overall numbers, but I'm definitely more narrowed in when it comes to KenPom on our conference numbers.
And then you just mentioned turnovers. I want to ask you about that. How do you feel it's been the last maybe 4 or 5 games, and what does Purdue do to have such a high defensive turnover percentage?
Really, really disruptive. We had 13 in the first half last year. 13 in the first half here last year. At our place, it was they were really disruptive. I think it was a 10 or 12 point game at halftime. They're just really disruptive. They're active. They try to keep you from changing sides. Really pressure the ball. Try to keep it out of the post. We had a lot of post turnovers, not from our post, but trying to feed the post. We got to get better with that.
Is there one I guess, sort of why that's bigger for, you mentioned the defensive numbers, because I know it was still early, but when you got finished with the non-conference, you were up close to like Virginia-type numbers, which I'd say is a gold standard for defensive efficiency. Anything, I mean, guys have mentioned Caleb being off the floor and how that's affected three-point shooting, but anything else you put your finger on?
You know, I think it's something I need to look at, and we'll probably look at as a whole in the offseason to see what our numbers are in general. You know, typically teams, as you get into January, take much better shots. Shot selection gets really improved, so you're playing longer possessions. I think we've had, you know, probably some injuries, but I just think we've got to get better in some areas. We have tweaked our lineup a little bit, maybe geared a little bit more towards playing some guys that might be a little bit better offensively than what their gifts are defensively. Maybe that's been a factor in some areas. But it's something we're definitely going to have to look at.
Shifting gears, just back to Purdue. Do you, I guess I've kind of always looked at them, and you look at how they make tournaments and they get stuff done. Short of really making a Final Four, they've checked almost all the boxes. I don't feel they get national recognition hardly at all. Do you feel the same way, or is there something to that?
I think basketball people really appreciate them. They are, you know, they're very much a basketball school, right? I think everybody would kind of acknowledge that. I think the people in the basketball world do recognize how good they've been back from Katie to Matt. Just how consistently good they've been, with the exception of, I know Matt a couple years ago had some frustrations with this group for a few years, 3 or 4 year stretch there. But man, have they been one of the real standards in this couple decades for sure. I agree with you. I'm not sure they get it quite at the level that they should. And some of that, I think last year their run a shot away from the Final Four garnered a lot of appreciation for that program, and they've done it kind of their way. They redshirt guys. They have a lot of older guys. They always have an older team, you know, and they've kind of done it their way.
You said after the game you're hoping that Kyle's fall wasn't anything other than what he's already been dealing with. How did he come out of the game, and what's his status for tomorrow? Yeah,
he's good. Yeah, Kyle is. It was more ankle than leg, yeah, he's in good shape.
And then we talked to Harrison Hookfin for, I think, the first time since he's been here. What does he give you in practice? Especially, we've been asking about all these injuries and guys being out.
Important.
Yeah, what is a role like that in a season like this for a player like that?
Well, Harry's great. Harrison's terrific. He's been a great addition as a walk-on. We picked him up last year during Kyle's injury because we wanted someone with size, and he's really jumped in and been great. He's really smart. He wants to be a doctor. He's serious about his academics, and brings kind of a serious-minded approach to our group. And he's physical. He throws his body around. He's great with the scout team. You know, it really helps when you got a guy that's smart with the scout team. And he compete. He and Danny Hummer, those guys have really helped us on scout team.
You mentioned up and down season for both you and for Purdue. I wonder, what are the challenges of facing a team that maybe had a tough stretch but then came out on the other side? Because obviously you guys have won 4 or 5. They've now won 3 or 4.
Yeah, I think they're going to come in. I think they're playing some of their best basketball. Again, the other night I think was an outlier. I think they're playing really well right now. So you could probably say 99% of the teams in the country, wherever you look at, maybe it's the start of the year where they had some struggles, or every team struggles in good leagues. I think we'll get their best. We definitely will, and that should be exciting for our guys. Should be. Hopefully, it'll be a great environment. I know the weather is going to be better than it was the other night. I would encourage everyone out there. We obviously need them. We're playing a terrific program and a terrific team.